Now, how are U.S. officials in Washington reacting to Trump's bridge or power plant threat? Is this being treated as a firm new policy in the United States?
Platform, and it's too soon to say whether this is actually a serious change in policy. We don't have any further details from any other parts of the US government to suggest that, but we do know that Donald made these kind of threats before on social media and in person. So far, he hasn't, completely destroyed the infrastructure, civilian infrastructure, the way he's described in the past. But this is a renewed threat to target bridges and power plants. Of course, those targets could be seen as violating international law. Some legal experts suggesting that if he did follow through with that, then that would be the case. He's saying that he is so frustrated by the Iranians striking ships on the Strait of Hormuz that he believes this is the only way, to stop them from doing that. Again, it's a symbol of the conflicting messages we've been getting from the Trump administration throughout this war. On the one hand, some very strong, aggressive rhetoric coming from President Trump, but at the same time, the suggestion that there is the window still open for negotiations, although in recent days, that does appear to have been not happening between the two sides. And we are now on the 11th consecutive night of American strikes on Iran.
Kate, with nearly 100 U.S. service members injured and several also killed this month, what's the mood you're picking up on Capitol Hill?
Well, I think there is real concern, certainly among Democrats who have never supported this war at all. And now we have the scenes just happening as we speak, in fact, of Donald Trump heading to Dover Air Force Base in the state of Delaware to receive the remains of those service members that have been killed in recent days in this conflict. And that is not the best kind of visuals that any president wants to show the country that they lead. And many of these Republican lawmakers on Capitol Hill are up for re-election come November, and they are going to have to send the message to their constituents that the way the country's going, the way the country's being led, the involvement in this war is a positive thing because they want to get re-elected, and they have to, defend what Donald Trump's doing. And they're going to find that much harder given the fact this war is incredibly unpopular among the American people. This week, a poll out with the Washington Post saying that only 29% of Americans approve of the way Donald Trump is handling this conflict. And so there is real concern among Republicans on Capitol Hill who are facing certainly elections about how they are going to kind of answer questions from their constituents who don't like this war because they don't really understand why the US is in it. They don't like it because it means gas prices are more expensive, energy prices are more expensive, and now they're seeing young Americans and older Americans, but certainly I think those pictures of those very young people, one of the service members coming home today was just 19 years old. It really does put a powerful image in people's minds, and they know they're going to have to face constituents to argue about why this war is important, and a lot of them aren't quite sure, I think, what they will say to that. Democrats, of course, using that as a message to say to the rest of the country that the Republicans, are not capable of running the country correctly. So this will become an election issue, and therefore it is an issue on Capitol Hill. We heard just yesterday Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, being questioned by senators. He's asking for billions more dollars to fund this war effort. And even some Republican senators were skeptical about why this money was needed and skeptical about exactly what the roadmap was for this conflict.
Kate, just as Mr. Saad bin Tifla said, Iran hit Kuwait, Bahrain and Jordan this week. So what is Washington's read on whether Gulf allies are still on board with the U.S. strategy?
Well, I think they do believe they have support of these allies at the moment, but clearly every time these countries receive the retaliation from the Iranians and receive airstrikes, then that is going to make it harder for them to continue to support the United States, given the fact that they are becoming targets through just being, helping to house US military bases. And I think it does put a strain on the relationship, given the fact that it's not pleasant to be the subject of Iranian strikes. And of course, many of these countries' economies depend on them being safe havens, if you like. Certainly the likes of the UAE, they have kind of westernized in many ways in terms of their economy and their commercial enterprises, and the idea of being the target of Iranian drone and missile strikes does not go with that image. So there is a concern there. I think there's also been a concern among some of these countries that they weren't fully informed by the United States before this war began, and they didn't know enough about it, and therefore were taken slightly by surprise. That's also a concern from European allies as well. So I think that potentially maybe made relationships slightly more strained. But overall, like the United States, most of the Gulf countries want to see freedom of shipping. They want oil exports to be able to move freely, and they don't want to see a conflict. And they also want to deter Iranian aggression. So they do have a lot of things in common. And certainly at the moment, I think the relationships are solid, but every time these strikes happen, it's going to make things a little bit harder the next time the United States needs something from these countries.